Is it on? Yes. I'm Christina Olausson from ETNO, the European Telecommunications Network Operators. Of course, I agree with the comments already said. I think this is something that comes up at our discussions frequently, that we need more policymakers, we need to prepare businesses better. From our side, and something I bring from our last planning meeting in Paris, is that we will try to organize a business forum group for EuroDIG to engage businesses in a more structured way also before EuroDIG takes place. ETNO will be happy to be a driving part in that. As said, a lot of businesses don't have resources and time to devote to fully participate 2 days in EuroDIG, but I hope that through this business network we could also bring in some views beforehand, not only through participating in the conference itself, and so I hope that will be a concrete way of addressing some of these issues. Thank you.
And just to add to that, I hope that we today, if we manage to go through our agenda, will define a topic for the intersessional work with what we can start with the NRIs to collaborate, or at least come up with some proposals where NRIs that are not in the room can later on decide on what topic they will work on. There was another one here, Andrea, and is there anyone else? Because otherwise I would close that here to go back to the, okay, then Andrea, you have the final word, and
yes,
then we look at the program.
Andrea Beccarli from ICANN. I subscribe all of the things that have been said so far that already set the stage for something that is very promising. We can see already that we are not at the global IGF MAG. We do come from a well more advanced platform for common understanding. And I think that for EuroDIG this year, it's kind of make it or break it. We see that legislation on internet governance issues is coming from the US. Most likely will come more from Europe. We have an opportunity of a new parliament, as has been said, coming up. We have just to make sure that we are not going to be overlooked once again, and we talk to each other, and we think that we are making the best discussion possible ground plans, while the businesses and parliaments across the world are trying to address issues that we see more and more are very relevant to every aspect of our lives. So I would really call for pushing our brains as much as we can to find out how we can move a bit forward from the discussion. We have the messages, these that I've just seen, the digital outlook for Europe. It's something that really goes in that direction, that we can see that we are on the map, and whoever comes around in next parliament, in the next commission, left to do something to deal with either copyright or e-privacy that now is dead, or or the following up on how to make sure that GDPR is going to be implemented. Anything that really we have been discussing for this past years is not going to be going in any direction without passing through EuroDIG. That's the challenge that we have to do. The technical community has been supporting EuroDIG since the beginning. We'll be continue to do so, but I see an urgency of including new technical communities, people that are working on AIs, on blockchain, on IoT. I don't see these technical communities coming in that much, so we have to do our outreach also in that sense. And then, think that, yes, messages are good, but what next? Can we take some topics and say, okay, on these topics we have enough knowledge, we have enough common understanding that we can propose a soft policy approach. We can propose a norm that we can abide to. We don't have to wait for the next Macron and next IGF to come and say, you have to do this and that. We've been discussing that for more than 10 years if you look at the global IGF. So that's just as opening up, and I thank you and I look forward to the rest of the day.
Okay, so thank you for this input on what we do expect from this year's EuroDIG. Very quickly, you see that also on the Outlook paper, the topics that have been discussed across Europe, according to the categories we are clustering our proposals. We will come back to that later, but it's kind of a heat map. It gives an idea what are the topics that are of greatest concern in Europe. You see it's quite balanced. There's a lot of things that go into the category of innovation and economic issues, but also security and human rights are spread over the continent. I will now go quickly through our timeline for 2019. It's basically the same kind of process we are following since a couple of years. We started our call for issues in October, and it was a bit shorter than in the past. It was 2 months only, and we stopped in November. We did that for a purpose to better align our agendas for CDIG and for EuroDIG, because usually we have our meeting in June, which is a good time of the year because we are way ahead of the IGF. We can submit our messages to the IGF, but for CDIG to organize their program and to have their processes, this time frame was a bit short, and sometimes the event have been too close to each other, so that it was rather difficult to include the Southeastern European region into the EuroDIG process. And with this earlier timeline, we hope to overcome these obstacles and have a smoother process. Then in December, our subject matter expert, the term was mentioned already quite some times, did review all the proposals. We received around 200 proposals this year, and the Secretariat afterwards took all the clustering of the subject matter expert, transferred it into a draft program. We will look at this in a minute, and today we are at a planning meeting. Then we will have 2 more weeks for comments on the draft program before we will expect a consolidated program in February. And then in February and March, we will start reaching out to org teams. I will explain that process a little bit more in detail later. And then we have like 3 months of a session planning process, and until we come to the EuroDIG in June, and afterwards the reporting, and then the circle starts again. So this is our plan for this year. And now, mentioned already the subject matter experts and the proposals. Here you have listed our categories, the number of submissions we received in each category, and the names behind the subject matter experts. I would like to give a big thank to those, because they are really doing a hell lot of work, reviewing all the proposals, clustering them into topics, into subtopics that kind of make sense. And that's actually a very good basis, and that's also something that we do differently than the global IGF, because that's the basis how the Secretariat can then merge all those subtopics into a meaningful program. We have the approach of not asking for workshop proposals, but for topics, because our concept is not to exclude anyone in terms of accepting or disliking workshops. We want to bring people together that want to discuss issue from different perspectives, and not keep people into silos where they then organize their session and do not really get in contact with those who might have a different opinion on the issue. So this is something we really work differently from the global IGF, and here a lot of our thanks goes to the subject matter experts that are actually giving the ground for this approach. This year you will see we have a majority of topics coming on the category of human rights, but also all other categories are pretty balanced. And you will see how we transfer that into a program in a minute. Just some statistics, you will also find them on the website. We do a joint call for issues, CDIG and EuroDIG, before we develop our agendas separately from each other, but the call is always, since quite some years, 3 or 4 years, is always done together. We have a very good gender balance. I think we have also a pretty good stakeholder balance in terms of submissions. Of course, there's a huge amount coming from the civil society and the academia, but also governments and even the private sector and the technical community. We could increase submissions from those communities, and I consider this a very good basis for this year's program. And then you will see how submissions are spread across the continent. Southeastern European and Western European countries are really balanced, and we have around 25 proposals coming from the Netherlands, which is also a good number. And overall, I must say, this year's proposal were of a very high quality. They were well thought and allow us really to look forward to a good agenda. Very quickly, I will this picture is also on the website, but for especially those who are not yet familiar with EuroDIG, it shows how we are clustering the proposals. So you get in proposals into different categories. Subject matter experts are looking into it, defining subtopics, and then you see already that we start mixing also the categories, that we have human rights issues discussed in a session that is actually looking into an economic issue, so that you bring in those voices also into discussions on another category. We come out with a draft program where we propose flash sessions, plenary workshops, etc. pp. And then after the program has been reviewed, and we will get feedback from the submitters, we get feedback from partners from this meeting today, we incorporate all the feedback and come up with a slightly changed version according to the feedback we get. And then we start on calling up for org teams, and also here we, the Secretariat is really looking, and also the subject matter experts, that we really have mixed org teams, that not in terms of stakeholder balance, that we don't have an org team that only consists of one organization or only consists of governmental people. We really have to merge the stakeholder in order to foster a multi-stakeholder dialogue. Are there any questions to the way how we cluster and work with the proposals? Okay, if this is not the case, then I move forward and would now actually hand over to our subject matter experts, and they will summarize their work and explain to which extent they came up with these subcategories. Our first category is access and literacy, and Olivier is the one that was looking into this category. Olivier, would you please? Okay. Maybe you can put your laptop over there.
Testing.
No.
Okay, so another year has gone by, and we've got another set of categories and another set of proposals that have come in. There's been quite a few, and as Sandra said, it's really, really good that we got some well thought out proposals. I think in previous years there were some people that sent just headers, one-liners basically saying, oh, we want to talk about literacy. Okay, what part of literacy? It's kind of an overarching thing. So this time around we had some really well thought out, quite in-depth proposals. I actually have a slightly different set of categories that I've done as subcategories, for the simple reason that I think there was quite a wide range of proposals that came in the in the access and literacy part of things. And we also had some cross-cutting issues. I mentioned media because actually I'm looking over at Elio. A number of the proposals that were made were talking about access, but access to media, freedom of speech, this sort of thing that went into it. And then others where you're looking at literacy, but literacy as to how to detect fake news, these sort of things. So that was also quite related. So I actually had 6 categories to start with. One was access in the community, and that's standard community networks, access in parts where you don't have internet access. And there's still quite a few parts of Europe that are in this case, even in places like the Netherlands or France or the UK. There's access and literacy in the community, and that was primarily the sort of specific groups that didn't have the knowledge to be able to access the network. So what we're talking about is either very young people or either people, senior citizens and so on, that might not be literate as such to be able to use the internet. Then we had 2 different types of literacy. We had basic literacy, primarily how to use the internet, and young children, youth, schools, this sort of thing, you know, how to basically make use of the internet in a safe way, but also, as I mentioned earlier, also categories of people that don't have the knowledge to actually be able to use the net. And then we had, and it's a difference from last year, we had advanced literacy. And advanced literacy goes into sort of the next level, how to start dealing with digital democracies, and how more and more topics, how more and more services are now moving on from the real space to the virtual space. E-governments, this sort of thing, and being able to navigate this space. And also, again, fake news, as I mentioned earlier, the whole thing about being swayed by Twitter feeds, by social media, all of that coming together. And that is not quite the same thing as how to access the internet, but it's actually how to not be manipulated by what goes on the internet. So I think a lot of the, or a number of the points on that went over to EuroDIG's group in the media category. And then I had access to content, and that's to do, there was one proposal that was dealing with this, and that deals also with censorship and with this, you know, the problems in being able to put content online and finding out, well, one person's proper content is another person's illegal content or something that is inappropriate. So that again went over to media. I basically threw most of the things over to EuroDIG, said, EuroDIG, you deal with it. And then finally, technical access, and that was just one proposal on that. And that's to do with the sort of devices and things. So we had a call over with Sandra and the Secretariat, and that's of course way too many subsections. And we came up with a smaller number of sections and said, well, many of these were actually treated last year already. And I think that's one of the things of EuroDIG is every year we try to have a very different program from the previous year. And when you have a topic, so you don't end up with a plenary again on the same topic as what happened in the previous years. What we do is to move it over to the position of perhaps, you know, flash sessions or a workshop, so that the EuroDIG doesn't become repetitive year on year. Louis?
I don't want to interrupt, but I think that I just want to get it a little bit clear that if we want there to be solutions to topics, then we're going to need some kind of recurrence. So I just want to make sure that the idea of we need to have something new does not somehow conflict with our objective that if we have something that actually needs to be revisited year after year in order to come up with a real solution rather than it being a talking shop, how you balance that?
Yeah, thanks. It's a good point. And I think that the question is, do you want it to be at a plenary again? And this is where I said that we would move it to a workshop in the year afterwards, except, of course, if it's suddenly become the big star topic and so on, in which case, okay, we'll go back to a plenary. But this is where we have to balance it over with the Secretariat, because, of course, as an SME, I think my topics are the most important ones, and everyone else's are not. And well, maybe not, but you know, we try and balance the stakeholder topics. And you know, at the end of the day, yes, you basically we try not to have repetitive workshops or repetitive plenaries. But as I said, the follow-up here that you'll find out is access in the community, for example. You'll find out as a flash. You know, we found some of the things we actually managed to move to a pre-event or even to the educational side of things. And you'll see in the overall program, when you'll see the program afterwards, there's been quite a shift in a number of the topics. Maybe I'm going a bit too far into the thing. So you'll see how it all comes out. But anyway, here, workshops on news literacy. This is a topic which I don't think we addressed last year at all. So that's, you know, that's sort of moved on to EuroDIG, as you can see. Great. Child online safety and literacy is still a very important topic, and that actually also includes all of this whole thing about hate speech and about all that, because online bullying and all this is really still happening very strongly. And then educational track, the advanced literacy thing, algorithms have become really, really strong. Now people are starting to wake up and thinking, wait a minute, my internet is not the same as yours. Why is that? You know, we're finding out that we're being tracked, and algorithms are doing things to the net to send us in a specific direction. And that also then links up with some of the points that are being made about people ending up in their own echo chamber. on social media. So they say, well, everyone I'm talking to is agreeing with me. It's great. But that's perhaps just because you're in one part of the world and others have got different locations. And then access in the community, follow-up from last year. Last year, if you remember, we had a very strong thing about the Touchetti project and community networks and implementing internet in parts of the world or parts of Europe that don't have it. It felt like it was a good opportunity to find out 1 year on what's happened and whether things have improved and you know what additional projects might have been implemented since then. And then finally, ethical behavior and digital citizenship is also a follow-up from last year. So that's how it's structured. You'll see in a moment after the other SMEs will not ramble as long as I do, but after the other SMEs tell you what they've done in their clustering. But all that I can say is was really, really enjoyable to do this year with the really cool proposals that were sent. So thanks.
Thank you very much, Olivier. I think we take questions after we have gone through all the categories. And I would now ask Zorina. She is looking... Pardon? Okay. Zorina, I pass you the mic to speak about our category Internet Governance Ecosystem.
Thank you, Sandra. Good morning, everyone. Zorina Teranu. I will speak from here because we only have a few proposals under this category, so I'll be as fast as possible. We received a total of 22 proposals under this category, but just like Olivier did with his category, I also moved some of mine to other subject matter experts, so we ended up with only a few actually fitting under this one. And happily, after a couple of years where we didn't really have session or a workshop at the EuroDIG looking into classical internet governance, broader issues, now we have at least one of them, so I'll go a bit into that. We had a few proposals suggesting a discussion on the future of internet governance from a political and technical point of view, and then a couple of proposals suggesting that we talk about Europe's role in broader internet governance discussions and processes. So we combined these proposals together into what will be a plenary at this EuroDIG, and this will look into global digital governance, whether technical solutions can respond to policy questions. And to the 4 proposals I mentioned earlier, a couple of other proposals from other categories were included here as well. And they were basically about the impact of technical policy trends and industry trends on internet governance, both discussions and processes. So once again, this will become plenary session, I think, at the start of EuroDIG. Then the second cluster was about enhancing participation in internet governance, and these are proposals that we usually receive at EuroDIG, so it's not so much something new. Addressing inequalities in internet governance processes, enhancing citizens' engagement and youth engagement. And as it was the case in previous years, we are going to have these topics discussed within the NRI Assembly that Sandra has already mentioned. And then 2 other proposals. One was about digital technologies and climate change, which will be a flash session, and the second one about ICANN issues, which as always will go under a flash, and that was from my category. Thank you.
Thank you, Zorina. The next one is human rights. Farzaneh is the subject matter expert since quite some year, and she was joined this year by Małgorzata Peck from the Council of Europe. Unfortunately, both of them are not available. Małgorzata is starting her vacation today, and Farzaneh is in the US based, and it's quite early for her at the moment. So I will quickly go through that categories. What was evident this year was that many of the proposals that were made with respect to human rights were also trying to make the linkage to economy. So the intersection of economy and human rights, this was something this year's proposals went. And we had also quite a good follow-up from the discussion of last year. While human rights proposals in the past tend to be very general, this year people were really looking into, okay, what has been discussed last year and how can we move that further? For instance, last year we had a blockchain plenary, and this year proposals came from similar people that participated in that plenary, they now want to look into blockchain and data governance in respect to GDPR. So a topic that is extracted from the discussion last year and will looked into a little bit more in detail this year. Child online safety, you remember this was also under access, so there is a good opportunity to combine this both. Then someone was proposing a data ethics, and this is one of the sessions that very much goes into merging it with the category of innovation and economic issues. GDPR was mentioned in many proposals, and we thought that it might be a good idea to give a status quo after 1 year GDPR, what has changed, what has happened, what are the ways forward, where are the challenges. And then also the emerging technologies and fair, accountable and transparency principles. Digital Rights Convention, censorship and pan-European harmonized cooperation were proposals that were kind of standalone. You couldn't really merge them into another session. So we will propose the submitter to organize a flash session. They can accept or not. So we will see how many flash sessions we will have in The Hague this year. And then one proposal went into the direction of looking into minorities like refugees, people that are disabled and things like this. And we think that's a good idea to deal with this also in the EuroDIG, which is the pre-event to EuroDIG. We are doing this since the very early days that we have a youth pre-event. We started with a roundtable in 2010. It developed to a pre-event over 2 or 3 days, and this year with our colleagues from the youth section here, Auki and his team, we will organize an event of 3 days, and that might be one of the topics that is dealt with in this pre-event. So that's it from the human rights category. Frédéric Donk was looking into innovation and economic issues. Frédéric, would you like to go to that?
Thank you. I will move here so I can show everybody that I can manage my laptop without Queen in it. As you said, and as many of my SME fellow said, we got a very good submission this year. I mean, this community has got to a new level of maturity. Especially in this bucket, innovation and economics. In the past, I had the impression that it was a bucket where people would put something where they had no idea where to put it elsewhere. No, it really is something that shows that people mean about it and has clear idea about what they want. And you have the results here. We had more than 25 proposals that were turned into 5 clusters. If I see well, I see 4 there, so we have something I need to, I know 5. We got the smart cities and governance. Wout, you were one of them to submit this. So there is a clear interest this year in smart cities, and I believe there is no coincidence that the Netherlands are also the place for it to happen. So we have got it in a workshop. We got trust by design. That was something that was translated into a plenary, and that was the IoT and the incentive and the economic development for the IoT. So that's the trust by design, and I love the title, by the way. We also have innovation, skills, and labor market. Lots of submission about that, the implication of the internet, of ICT on the labor market. Well, that is something that I believe was worth a workshop, and that is the case. Then we got, I have got some interesting submission that I didn't know how to deal with it, and hopefully we translate this into flash session, including sovereignty, one of them, and the regulatory approach to guiding ICT in innovation was one of them. Let me check again here. Which I believe are worth discussing. So the flash session is a wonderful format for those discussions. I had blockchain again. You know what I think about blockchain. Yeah, it's a buzzword. I still need to better understand what we need to do with it. I see it's also been hosted in human rights. Let's discuss this. You should expect me saying a few words about it. But when it's about the innovation, I was, well, in a position that I had also to submit consolidation in the internet. You know that the Internet Society will soon consult the community, but come up with some report on consolidation. This is one of our biggest ambition for this year, and that is consulting the community about what's happening in the market right now with those giant consolidation. So it might turn into a flash, I don't know, I still need to make up my mind, but I believe it's worth discussing it. So we got labor market, we got blockchain privacy and data governance, question mark, is it worth a workshop? I'm not sure. Smart city and governance for sure, trust by design. And then the last one was emerging technologies. We got a lot of submission, somewhere ill-defined. There was something with a clear focus, and there was ethno on emerging technologies and 5G, so I clustered all of them. I believe there is a clear ethno lead here, but the others, I believe, should add value to this endeavor as well. So this is where we are, and I'm very happy about this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Frederick. Let's move to media and content, and here EuroDIG is in charge of. EuroDIG, you have the floor.
Thank you. Okay, good morning. Media and content. In Tallinn, we talked about post-truth era. In Tbilisi, we talked about information disorder. And now, when I'm proposing a plenary on tackling online harms, somebody would think that we are sort of rutted in the same tracks and just going over and over again something that is already old stuff. Now, I think three reasons why we still continue in this track, and of course it's in many ways changed. But first of all, most of the proposals were in this vein. And I think if we want to be a sort of bottom-up organization, then we have to respect the proposals from the ground. The other reason is that the situation has not improved. Actually, it's become worse. And not only that we have the information disorder, fake news, whatever we call it, developing even further, but actually in many countries, more or less authoritarian countries, let's say, this has become a pretext for constraining freedom of information, freedom of expression. So it's like a double-edged sword, I mean, for us. And the third reason is that we have, I think the exhibit A is President Macron. He made that speech that has already been referred to here, 45 minutes at IGF. And it shows that governments are genuinely worried about the information disorder. The other example is that in the UK regulator intends to get regulators of in Europe and maybe larger into a meeting to discuss this phenomenon. So we have clearly the emphasis on regulation and so the determination from the government side that something has to be done. And of course in Europe we have the elections coming, European election. That's one reason, one more reason for the alarm that is felt. And it's not only European elections, we have a lot of national elections as well this year. So for all these reasons, I suggested that we still keep that as a plenary topic. Copyright, actually, I don't know, this probably comes from an older version because there were rather few suggestions for copyright. And I don't see among the plenaries, I don't see that anymore. So the tackling online harms is the sort of main thing. We have 2 workshops that are leading directly into this plenary. As to say, media literacy, news literacy, whatever. We actually have one proposal where it is argued that news literacy is something that is most relevant here, and then we have media literacy, we have digital literacy, and so on and so forth. So this is one of the workshops leading to the plenary, and the other is, its now working title is Journalism and Democracy, but I think that we talk about how the journalists are really in the first line, fending off the trolls, fending off the attempts to infiltrate and to influence elections and other features of the democratic process. So we can really talk about journalists defending democracy here. There's one interesting subject that perhaps could make a flash session. There's one proposal from a student. Well, I think he's more than a student by now, but anyway, somebody who has studied at University of Potsdam, but also studied at the Communications University in China. And I think that it would be good to actually get a flash information on China, because China is, we always talk about China, I mean China is this and that, but it would be good to have somebody who is knowledgeable about that subject and how that differs from the European concept. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Martin, you have a question or comment?
Yes, Martin here. Very interesting to get this also as a plenary, I think. And I think in reality it's about accountability of journalism. And maybe if we can expand it to the role of the big internet companies, whether they're media companies or not, I think that's a very hot topic. Great if we can include that.
Okay. Let's move to the next. This is security and crime. And Tanya is, by the way, Tanya is the one who proposed in 2015 the concept of subject matter experts. No, I'm not blaming you. Before that, it was the core group or the secretariat looking into how to draft the program. But of course, a handful of people does not have the expertise on all the issues. So she was the one that said, let's look an expert on this and let's ask an expert to bring proposals together in a meaningful way that makes sense. So thanks to Tanya, we have this concept now. Tanya, floor is yours.
Is it working? Well, thank you, Sandra. So unfortunately, I know I'm not the first subject matter person here, so I cannot break the news about the quality of the proposals. Because as my colleagues already said, the quality of the proposals this year was exceptionally good. And most of the time, like in the past few years when I was serving as a subject matter person for cybersecurity, sometimes it felt like, you know, random words generator proposals. But this year, I'm really happy to announce that the cybersecurity submissions were outstandingly good, which allowed us to do 2 things, basically. First of all, to respond to the current and pressing cybersecurity issues in the program. And secondly, to build upon what we have been building for the past 3 to 4 years. Because, Sandra, if I have a minute, may I explain? 5 years ago, 4 years ago, people came to cybersecurity session and they were bored and they were only listening to speakers which were having their own party on stage. So in 2015, we decided to start with even building capacity within the community to speak about the issues. And in the last 3-4 years, we walked these talk, we walk this thought, you know, and I believe that right now we are at the point where we can meaningfully engage into, get the entire community coming to EuroDIG and being engaged into the discussions. So basically 31 proposals, and I got several transferred to me, so it was like maybe 34, 35, and I clustered them in the following way. Well, first of all, there are plenty of proposals submitted on the norm-making processes. Last year in Tbilisi, we had the small workshop on the norm-making, but mostly about the private actors' involvement into the norm-making processes. This year, as I mentioned already, it's like twofold fitting into the program. First of all, you know that there are plenty of like the norm-making process are mushrooming. Say cybersecurity, put digital, put the word Geneva or whatever big city, and then you will have Paris call proposals. You will have global committee on stability on cyberspace. You will have digital Geneva convention from private players, and how do we bring this all together, and is anything going to work? And this is going to be the question for the plenary. And I believe that it is very good that this EuroDIG and this plenary is going to take place in The Hague, which is, you know, famous for being a city of peace and security and stability. So norm making and international approaches, I propose this topic to be a plenary. Then we have two workshops. First of all is new technological challenges in cybersecurity. We have been discussing the collaboration on the side of approaching the topic, so how stakeholders are collaborating. So the question for me, when I saw the bunch of proposals again on how we're addressing challenges on cybersecurity, what I saw new here and what will help us to build upon what we discuss in Brussels and Tallinn and partially in Tbilisi at the cybersecurity workshop is, are we ready to address new technological challenges, and how we're addressing them from the point of view of collaboration, cooperation, and also from the point of technology. And the third cluster, which is also a workshop, made me very happy, because for a number of years I saw normally only one or two quality proposals on cybercrime, and it was it was difficult, you know, to really get quite a few to say we are organizing a cybercrime workshop pure on cybercrime and digital evidence and digital investigation. I believe that this year we are at the edge where we probably might get breakthrough about trans-border access to evidence. But at the same time, we have some processes going on the European Union level, like, for example, the proposal on e-evidence, which is widely criticized both by the governments and privacy advocates, but European Union is still going forward with this. So the workshop will focus on criminal justice and access to electronic evidence, and I believe it's critical for Europe. It's probably will be focused from two perspectives: Council of Europe, which is dealing with cybercrime at the forefront of this topic, and also safeguarding human rights, and maybe discussing also European e-evidence proposals. And then I had three topics which looked to me like standalone topics deserving flash sessions. Well, first of all is the submission on cyber survivability, whatever that means. I believe that, I mean, I don't know if the person who submitted it wants to talk about this as a flash session, but I put it there because it is a new concept that includes security, but also, you know, continuous security. So about survivability of the networks of people, of users, and so on. So not more into, you know, the entirety of critical infrastructure and daily lives. Then there was a flash session proposal which I registered as a flash session: hybrid warfare and content regulation. It is a stand-alone issue because behind this is the notion that we address cybersecurity for many years, and the narrative was that cybersecurity is a technical threat. But right now we are moving a lot into the misinformation, disinformation debate, which actually influences cybersecurity and is being brought as a hybrid warfare. And the third one, which was very specific and which I liked very much, and I don't want it to get lost in any of the plenary or the workshop, is coordinated vulnerability disclosure, which I also proposed as a flash session. This is all from me. Happy to answer any questions now or later.
Thank you, Tanya. And then let's move to, last but not least, technical and operational issues. And we had quite a good number of proposals this year. It was a bit in the shadow over the last years, but I think we are very much back to technical and operational issues. Chris, you have the floor.
Hello? Hello? Yep, okay. Thank you, Sandra. Yeah, that was a bit of a spoiler alert. I was going to say we have 15 proposals. It was very good to see. But no, it was. Well, everyone has said very good quality proposals this year, and I think, as I mentioned, also some really quite timely and relevant proposals that will be good to discuss, and I think will make for a very a good program for EuroDIG. The main plenary session that we have, and it's a plenary in parallel with a number of other workshops, so it's not a standalone, but is intersection of standards and public policy. This is not drawing on a single specific proposal. This is really looking at a number of proposals that came in that dealt with this, what seems to be a common thread here. And that thread is, as we know, we've seen that regulation is really starting to hit the ground now. We're actually seeing proactive regulatory approaches to the internet. What we're also seeing is some very proactive approaches in the technical space, in protocol space. Examples like DNS over HTTPS is something that's been discussed a lot in the last year, but also seen even things like DNSSEC or RPKI, some of these other issues that are looking to address in the same way these generic issues of trust, of privacy that everyone recognizes. And so what we now see is this happening from the regulatory side, this happening from the technical side, and a lot of tensions that are being raised there. Sometimes really those approaches are going for quite different outcomes or quite different strategies to achieve the same outcomes. And so the idea is that this plenary session would be a chance to unpack some of those tensions, look at where this is happening and some of the examples. But that will need some very proactive session organizers to really dig deep into some of the examples there. So in that vein, then going on to the workshop that's related, we have DOH, DNS resolution over HTTPS here as a standalone workshop. This is something that really has been discussed quite extensively in a couple of technical forums in the last 12 months. And I think it raises some very interesting issues about the consolidation of power with certain actors in the internet and our approach to security and privacy generally. So I think it probably makes sense as a workshop, but also to unpack some of the issues that contribute to it being an interesting issue. Educational track, we have a proposal from ICANN for some, what's behind your router is what they've called it. I think we've had in previous years these kinds of sessions where we have a side track on day one, which actually provides some technical background, technical education. I think that's useful to have, and so I think it will be good to get some other actors working with ICANN too. And I think we have 2 sessions in the morning devoted to this, so we can actually dig deep into some of the technical background there. In terms of flash sessions, IPv6 is obviously something that always pops up. One of the proposals that the RIPE NCC came forward with this time is looking not so much at IPv6, but also what's going on in the IPv4 world, where the transfer market is emerging. That's having certain issues that would be interesting for perhaps regulators, perhaps the internet governance sphere. This flash session, I think, is a chance to bring those 2 things together to look at, okay, while we are seeing significant uptake in v6, what's going on with v4? Why are people still paying big money for IPv4? And then the other flash session there is protection, storage, processing and transfer of large amounts of data. And I think that was something that didn't really seem to fit into a lot of the other categories. So we'll talk to the proposer about just doing that as a flash. Finally, the pre-day events, universal acceptance. There was actually a session on this in Tbilisi, which was quite useful, and I think there was some discussion in that about continuing that, coming back and revisiting. So this is an opportunity, and we'll speak to the organisers from that, and also the people who proposed it this year about continuing that. Yeah, okay, yes. Okay, cool. And that's it. Yeah, thank you.
So thank you very much, Chris, and all the others. The way it works, when subject matter experts have done their work, we organize a phone call with the Secretariat, and they are basically explaining it to us in a way just they did it to you now. And when looking at all the categories overall, it becomes a little bit clear for the Secretariat what will be the focus areas of this year. And we summarize them here on one slide. As it was said already, internet governance on the intersection of policy and tech. So this is a topic back on the agenda. Internet governance as a conceptual discussion was a little bit in the shadow over the past years, but this year this was proposed by many, and it was always mentioned in relation to technical solutions. Human rights in relation to new technologies. I mentioned that already when I was speaking about human rights category. Media, as Uriel proposed, it's an ongoing issue. The workshops and the plenary are kind of more or less on the same issues, but this goes also in the direction what Lucevi's mentioned, that sometimes you have to continue a discussion from year to year to stay on the track, because there are so many things happen in this area at the moment that you have to keep discussing these issues in order to have a discussion that might lead to a solution that is taken into consideration by policymakers. Then technical issues is back on the agenda, DNS issues and standards. Participation in internet governance comes especially from the NRI networks. International security cooperation, Tanya mentioned that how to cooperate, how to bring together all these different initiatives that are mushrooming. Advanced literacy. Literacy was always on the agenda, but this year we are talking about advanced literacy algorithms. And then one topic which turned to a buzzword already, which is artificial intelligence. And I would like to share with you that subject matter experts started a brainstorming or a discussion about in how far artificial intelligence relates to internet governance. Is it a pure internet governance topic, yes or no? And should it be covered in our main agenda, or is it rather a tool with some internet governance implications? I think this is a discussion we will have here today. I think that's also a general discussion that we have to have about what IGF for us, and not only EuroDIG, but also the global IGF and the nationals, what they should deliver. Is it the more societal debate that is broadening up for all the issues, or do we purely stick to pure internet governance issues? As I said, it was a discussion that emerged on the subject matter expert mailing list, but I think that's something we should also discuss here today. So how we did translate that into a program, just to give you an idea, after having the phone calls with the subject matter expert, Rainer and I, we had a 5 hours phone call. Then we were giving us a break, and then we had another day with a 2 hours phone call, bringing this all together. We have the day of pre-events, and as for the global IGF, day 0 becomes kind of more and more important. You will see that all the slots are more filled already, that people and organizations reached out to us already reserving a slot for day 0. We have the EuroDIG 3 days before, from 16 to 18 of June, that's one pre-event, and then we can start in workshop rooms, not in the plenary room. We can start in workshop rooms, but with limited technical infrastructure. For instance, remote participation and all this probably we cannot offer, because we are using actually the time of the setup to offer these rooms to organizers. So one thing that we started with last year is a newcomers briefing, where subject matter experts are exactly doing what they did today, walking through the category, what's in the program, what they can expect, and so on. It worked well last year. I think we should keep that also for the Netherlands. City of The Hague. Salima, you requested already a slot because you want to speak about the legal Delta plan. Maybe you can elaborate later what in detail it might entail, but information on this will be published on our wiki. Then we introduced one slot, one track for artificial intelligence. So what we did, we put all the proposals that related to artificial intelligence under a very generic topic, AI 360 degree. That's the working title, nothing is carved in stone. But we propose to have one slot on day 0, also including a discussion about artificial intelligence in the context of internet governance. And also the Council of Europe very concretely proposed already to hold a session about artificial intelligence as the risk to enhance discrimination. So this would make one slot, and we believe that bundling and bringing those topics together in a track also makes it easier for people to attend. They don't have to attend all the 3 days, but if they come to a day when their topic of they're interested on, they can actually follow a track and don't have the sessions spread around the agenda. As last year, we reserved a big slot for the NRI Assembly. We will talk about getting citizens on board, and we will hopefully also do some intersessional work or start intersessional work. Let's see. On getting citizens on board, there was one proposal that was very interesting, which is by an organization called Mission Publique. They are organizing participation meetings, not only for internet governance, but for various issues across the continent. And I think it's a good idea to bring them together, their knowledge, their expertise with the NRIs, because these NRIs are also looking in how to bring in people, how to foster participation. So I hope we can create some synergies between NRIs and this organization, Mission Publique. Then, and as a tradition, the IoT Dynamic Coalition, Martin is the chair of that one, is holding meetings, I think, since 2014 or 13 even, I'm not so sure. But you will be accompanied this year by the newly founded DNSI Dynamic Coalition, which was founded in Paris this year. And they also requested a slot to have the discussion about universal acceptance. So all the proposal on universal acceptance go into this. It will be a follow-up from last year, but it will be an official meeting of the Dynamic Coalition for DNS issues. And then we have also a slot for Cybersecurity. Council of Europe here again requested a slot. They had the same people meeting last year, so they use it as an opportunity to continue their discussion. And the Global Commission on Stability in Cyberspace, they would also like to provide an update on their work. So if it stays like this, we have basically only one room, which is one slot, which is still open and can be assigned to another organization or another session. On day 1, these blue sessions are in the hands of the host and of the secretariat or of the partners. So we have reserved slots for keynotes, we have reserved slot for welcome, and we have a reserved slot so that the Netherlands can present themselves. You might remember in the past we had an open mic session. It worked good for 2 years. It worked good in Brussels, good in Tbilisi. It wasn't really a good thing in Tallinn. It wasn't really a good thing in Tbilisi. But in Tallinn, we started to give more space to the host, to ask them to make a presentation, what's on in their country, what they have an expertise on. And so we thought, let's skip that open mic session and give the space to the country. We called it at the moment very general, what's up in the Netherlands, and it's up to the Netherlands to decide what they want to present. We could imagine that one proposal that was submitted by Marjolein was about the Dutch third. They have a new approach in dealing with cybersecurity issues in relation to ethical hackers. Marjolein, maybe later on you can elaborate on this a bit, and I'm not sure if this will be the topic for this plenary, or if the Dutch country decides to have another topic here. So that's just the proposal at the moment. Then we gave a prominent place to this topic of the interlinkage between internet governance and technical solutions. We could imagine that in a lightning talk, we have two people elaborating for the technical community or for the technical perspective. We were thinking of someone like Tim Berners-Lee. He is very much engaging into the discussion about the future of the internet, and maybe he is the one who looks at internet governance and the future of our net from this technical perspective, and then someone who speaks about the political dimension, about the policy issues, and then having a plenary discussing what these two keynote speakers, let's go, lightning talk speakers, have just brought as input. In parallel to that, we have the EDU track, and as Chris mentioned already, there was quite a good attendance in the past in these sessions, and it would be good not only to scratch on the surface, but really to dig into the issues a little bit deeper. And although there's only one proposal here, I think, which came from ICANN, there are various organizations like RIPE NCC Center that regularly are contributing to those sessions. So Chris proposed to have a bigger slot for us, dig into it a little bit more, and get all the technical communities, organizations to work on this educational track. And then just to stay on this educational track, in the afternoon, in the afternoon, we will have this advanced literacy algorithm awareness. Olivier proposed a session that has been taking place in the UK during the IGF UK already. It was a very good session, as you said, very interactive. So this could be something that we continue on our educational track on day 1. Then you see we try to mark with the arrows where where one session is building upon the other. Coming from this plenary about internet governance, can technical solutions respond to policy questions, we propose a second plenary on the intersection of policy. And you see the colors, they changed. While this plenary might be more look at it from an internet governance perspective, the second plenary has a focus on the technical solutions. And there are quite a number of proposals that went under this. And it could be really a very good follow-up from the first one. Then a workshop on GDPR status update, a workshop on regulation emerging technologies. ETNO was mentioned already, the G5 technologies, but also other new technologies could be discussed here. And then child online safety and literacy. This was not so much on the agenda in the past, but we had quite a number of proposals and also well thought and high quality proposals that we said, let's do it a workshop again and let's give them space to discuss child online safety and literacy during the main program and not only on the flash session. A reserved slot for a keynote, and then we have the 2 sessions on human rights and on regulating and innovation, merging into a plenary where emerging technologies and fair, accountable and transparency principles will be dealt with. That's our proposal for day 1, and I will quickly go through day 2 and then open up the discussion. And by the way, the flash sessions, they are just placeholder here at the moment. We do not assign flash sessions at this time of the planning process. That's dealt with later on once we have confirmation from submitters that they do really want to hold a flash session. Day 2, we start with an option, a hot topic optional session. This is based on the experience from 2013 when Snowden had his disclosure. This was a hot topic that popped up just 2 weeks before EuroDIG. No session was in the program, but it was worthwhile giving some space for the community. It was an early morning session, but the room was packed and everyone was interested in dealing with this hot topic. So whatever might pop up before EuroDIG, which is not covered in the agenda, here we have the opportunity to deal with it. Then we would like to start with an update on the digital cooperation from the UN high-level panel. They will release their report in April or May, and EuroDIG is a perfect opportunity for a first public discussion, taking questions on this report and discussing it. And it will be a perfect follow-up also from the process that started this year and was also a topic during the IGF. Then very prominently also the security and norm making and international approaches. By the way, these titles are only working titles. It's just to give a focus on which direction we should go. It's up to the org team to define the real title that then goes into the program. And here on day 2, we tried even more to allow people to follow a track. For instance, you see you have a cybersecurity track here, and you have a media track on the other side. With this, we really hope that for some people it will make it easier to have a discussion, a continuing discussion for one day. And also some people say, I cannot free myself for 2 or 3 days, but I can do one day. Then that's their chance to participate in a complete track. That's also something that is new that we haven't done in the past. Sessions were more spread all over the place. This year we are trying to get a little bit more track experience for our participants. The same goes for media. We have 2 workshops, as EuroDIG proposed, on journalism and in defense of democracy, news media and news literacy. This is merged with many proposals from the category of access, and both of those will feed into the final plenary tackling online harms and regulation, which is a perfect follow-up from last year's EuroDIG. But we also have as a separate issue, we are proposing to hold a plenary on the EU copyright reform. This is an ongoing issue for a while. We had in Tallinn for 2 years ago, we had a pre-event by the copyfighters. And we also had last year a pre-event organized, and we would like to have a continuation, and we think it's a good time in the year to summarize all this issue about the copyright reform and whom it might help. And then we have a lot of sessions where, as said already, human rights issues are merged with economic and innovation issues. They will also create a little track here. So while we discuss here in the plenary data ethics, algorithm and trust by design, a very broad topic, people can then decide, okay, I attend afterwards a session that looks more into smart cities and governance, or I attend a session that looks more into blockchain and privacy. And then one topic which is not purely internet governance, but which is something that is a broader societal debate: what skills are needed on the labor market to cope with innovation, robots taking our work. We had a plenary in Tallinn. So this is also kind of a continuation from the years before. Also last year we had a workshop on this, if I'm not mistaken. And on the technical side, we have the DNS over HTTPS that popped up this year, should be a workshop too. Did I forget? We have a EuroDIG General Assembly. This is something, as Thomas already explained, our structure, this is something we have to do once in a year. Usually we do it at EuroDIG because most of the people are together then, and this General Assembly is also open to the public to attend. This is usually in the lunch break. And this is it for day 2. And here is just a list for your information about all the sessions that were proposed for flash sessions now. 20 at the moment for 13 slots. From the experience, we know not every one of the submitters will really be interested in holding a flash session, but others will join later. So we will see if 13 slots will be enough. If not, we might find another room to have more flash sessions. But that's something we will accommodate at your request. Okay, that's it from my side, and now it's up to you to let us know how you find this program and move forward. I have one over there, Jörn, and then Osman.
Thank you. I think you did a great job. And I would propose to have some kind of educational session on GDPR, because everybody talks about it, but not too many really know what is new, what it is about. It's not just about consent and what it means. So maybe an educational session on day 0 concerning GDPR might be a good idea.
Thank you, Osman. Well, I'm talking especially under the influence, my perspective is under the influence. At the outset, I missed her name, but she said that politicians' attention should be attracted to that issue, to these issues. And I think Frederick echoed that. Well, I was a member of parliament for 9 years in Turkey, and 3 years of which was in the Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe. So I have that political background, and 20 years academicians, and currently civil society activities. With that background, so I totally agree with that policymakers and politicians, and I've been thinking how to do that as I was listening to this excellent presentation. Few remarks for the present. Yes. Okay. Olivier mentioned about to avoid recurrence on the one hand. On the other hand, of course, we need to proceed towards a solution. This fake news, of course, it's a recurrent event, but still there, and especially becoming more and more even disconcerting with some companies. So even though recurrent, I think at the cost of being repetitive, we should be sensitive about that, I think. Frederick presented innovation and economics. I was surprised not to see universal basic income to be mentioned there, along with this hot topic of, you know, there are several buzzwords going around, like Industry 4.0, along with Japan's Society 5.0. Those are buzzwords, and many politicians really use them without exactly knowing what's under those topics. But I was surprised not to see universal basic income and Society 5.0 not to appear as a topic, which I would recommend if it is possible at all. Tatiana mentioned about cybersecurity. I'm always concerned, and I observe that happening in Turkey and in several other places in the United States, where I lived about quarter a century, using cybersecurity as a pretext for censorship and limiting the freedom of speech. That sensitivity should there be, because people nitpick certain points, politicians, I mean, authoritative politicians, and use them to support their censorship policies in many places that are observed. Euro mentioned about journalists defending democracy. In many places in Turkey, journalists are under tremendous pressure, let alone defending democracy. Intentionally or unintentionally bias the society towards worse. Finally, one couple final points. Chris mentioned about technical and operational issues. One technical issue has not come up later on in relation to AI and internet governance as well. I think the major technical issue in this context in AI is the intentional or unintentional biases in AI and machine learning algorithms, which used to be my research area, actually. Obama set a task force for that, to investigate that. Trump doesn't care such things. But that's a major issue. Macron is well aware of that. He said that as a president, his main aim is to make the people trust the AI systems that they put. And Frederick mentioned that design by trust. He loved the term. I loved it too. And design by trust is very important, especially in AI and machine learning, because many of those biases are unintentional, but some are intentional. And design processes should be in focus somewhere, at least technical issues. I saw AI in IG. That final remark is, as a keynote speaker, Tim Berners-Lee was mentioned. I strongly, strongly recommend, if possible at all, Tim Wu, W-U, the latest book being The Attention Merchants. And I think an excellent book is Master Switch. You know, how these technologies came about over the history to project towards the future. Tim Wu, I think, is on top of all the issues, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you. So, okay, we start with Marie-Louise, Wout, Daphne, Mark, and Nina. I hope I keep the order.
Thank you. Louise here. I just wanted to add to the journalist defending democracy one, because there's really good research being done, and I can say only from the ones that I've been following more closely, which is ones in Oxford, about also kind of incorporating into this dialogue the idea of a reflexive kind of understanding the role of journalists in covering new technological trends such as AI. And there is some interesting research being done on that regard, especially saying how journalists also have the responsibility to have this reflexive kind of like critical approach to what their role is in covering this. And I say that because one of the key arguments that have been being raised throughout this point is just the parroting of the ethics dialogue and the need of fairness, transparency, and accountability, and how this comes a lot from the private sector kind of language. I may be becoming very theoretical now and abstract, but I do think this is a relevant thing to think about as a dimension that links journalists to the public policy debate, and think about how journalists can better cover these new technological trends such as AI, IoT, security, and these emerging technologies. And finally, what I was going to say is, well, and yeah, as I said, trying to do this link as to how can we think about not only these principles, but on the other hand, how can we think the role of journalists in covering these trends, and bringing new ideas to how can we make better public policy instead of just kind of bringing the private sector debate. I don't know if I was very clear, but kind of like trying to link this reflexive role of the journalists in covering new trends, and on the other side, how do we link that to public policy making? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Next was
Walter Natris, thank you. I'd like to make two comments. The first is on what has been said several times through the whole program presentation, is that we've discussed it last year and the year before, and now we make it a flash session or a plenary anyway, or whatever. You can see that there's a lot of proposals on a specific topic, and that means that it goes up or it goes down in one way. We're talking about bringing in other stakeholders. We're talking about using the NRIs to come up with topics or up or down. If we use EuroDIG, not only to make a flash presentation on a presentation that had probably been made 10 times before, but to come up with a message or a recommendation. Because on the first one that triggered me was the child, the first presentation, the child literacy of what was it, abuse on the internet was mentioned, etc. we've had dozens of discussions at different levels. If we would use EuroDIG to come up with the best practices currently available, that would mean you have a totally different session, because you would ask for input from INRIs and others, probably get the chance to interconnect with people that may not be at EuroDIG usually, and then use the session to come up with an outcome. And that outcome is something you can actually present to the whole world, saying these are the best practices in Europe going around at this point in time. And then you have a totally different sort of use for the EuroDIG. And that's in the report that also goes to the IGF today, I think.
Do
so that's
you
one.
know the messages?
So, okay, thank you. But that, I think that is something which you can actually use all this energy for, instead of having combined 10 different points of view, but use the points of view. The other one is what I would like to point out is that Tatjana mentioned something about norm setting and internet standards, and the technical community came with something with internet standards. And what is going to happen is that it will be two very different tracks. So there will be maybe cybercrime fighters, and on the other hand, the technical community. I think what is going to be necessary to bring these communities together, and maybe even policymakers, and maybe even politicians, because making the internet safer, there are dozens of solutions that will actually help at this point in time to make it somewhat safe, to make the users safer, the organization safer, except they're not implemented. And what is the reason for non-implementation? That could be monetary, it could be economic, it could be just carelessness or whatever. But we need to find out the reasons behind it. And then you know where pressure can be applied to change probably the commercial side for implementation of already available standards. And that is something where these worlds need to come together. And if we cut them up, it will be the same community talking the same messages instead of listening to others. And that's something which I think is worthwhile contemplating, to see if there's some sort of merger possible which brings these different worlds together. So, thank you.
Tanya, you look like you want to reply to this?
I actually think that I just didn't make myself clear, probably not enough coffee in the morning. In the second workshop we proposed, I mentioned that the approach is twofold, that we might want to focus, in addition to collaborative challenges, on technical challenges, but this is all within the workshop, which is in the middle of the cybersecurity track. So I thought about that, and we try to bring communities together. So this would be definitely the intention, but thank you very much. We might want to be a bit clearer on the intention here. Thanks.
Indeed, just to add to that, these tracks should really not separate the communities. It should just make it a little bit easier for people to follow a certain issue. Of course, if you follow the media track, you won't be able to participate in the security track, but we were looking at topics that are not too competitive to each other, media and cybersecurity and so on and so forth. So next in row is Daphne.
Good morning, I'm Daphne Salvino. I'm from the Dutch Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Policy. I firstly would like to say that I really believe that you did a good job as well on the draft program. It sounds very interesting in a very variety of subjects. I only had one proposal. It's mostly also what Arnold already talked about. He already introduced the AI strategy we're currently working on at the Dutch government. And I think this would be very interesting to include in the sessions as well. Especially because also the timing is really good. We have it's supposed to be completed in June 2019, which will be around EuroDIG. And also it is really related to internet governance, since it's mostly focused on policy implications or policy questions, and that's more the focus than technical questions. And as well, it's really a multi-stakeholder approach. Also because one of the building blocks of this AI strategy is a report from the field. So we're really working towards already using the ideas from the field to work on. And also we are really integrating or having a session with public and private stakeholders also to really get as most multi-stakeholder approach as possible. And also this Dutch strategy of AI we try to have it in line with the European strategy, which is more a human-centered approach. So I think it would be also interesting, for, especially in EuroDIG, when we are looking more at the European approach. And most to that, yeah, I think that's why it's really about internet governance, because we're really thinking about the future of AI and how AI can help society in the future as well. Yeah.
Next in the row is Mark, Nina, and then Michael. You have a direct reply? Okay. We have this two fingers concept. If someone shows two fingers, then it's a short reply on something that has just been said.
Yeah, my name is Michael Rothert from ECHO, Germany. For the AI strategy, the European Internet Service Provider Association is doing a survey currently for the different European countries on their AI strategy, just to give you that hint.
And a two-finger reply from Valentina?
No, it's not a reply, just to complement what she said, that right now, actually, I'm from the European Commission. By the way, good morning, everyone. Right now, actually, we have the ethical guidelines on AI that it's open for comments to everyone. If you want to contribute as well, of course, we will close the comment by June, but surely we will be able to provide an update on that, so to complement the Dutch strategy as well.
Okay. Then let's go back to the line with Mark, and then Nina, and then I have Giacomo.
Yes, thank you, Sandra. Good morning, everybody. Mark Arvell from the UK Government, Digital Ministry. Thanks very much to everybody who's worked on this in reviewing the issues, proposals, and providing this draft program. It's very, very impressive, very rich program potentially, and on first sight of this, I just have a couple of questions. Maybe they can be clarified now. My first question was about this whole big issue that we opened up today's meeting with about the IGF and the future of it, and strengthening the IGF. We in the UK government, we're consulting stakeholders on this in terms of how to reorientate the IGF, the global IGF, and this may impact on regional IGFs like EuroDIG as well, to make them more impactful, to attract the high-level participation from governments and business. And I don't quite see this coming through in the program in terms of an opportunity for the European stakeholder community to express their views on this. Should the IGF change in any way? Should it become more decisional? How can we measure the impacts of messages and so on in influencing and shaping where policy is being decided in industry and government? This is, as we heard in Paris, this is highly important issue. It's strategic. It's intersecting with those governments who would like to see fundamental change, and we're approaching the halfway point of the mandate of the IGF, the global IGF, next year. It's going to be very timely. So maybe I've missed it in terms of Serena's account and the descriptions, discussions that we've had about the individual sessions, but I don't quite see it in the program at the moment. My second question was on the media and content side, and thanks to Yurio for reviewing where things stand in terms of the program on media and content. And now I have a question about the 7th plenary, tackling online harms, regulation by whom, how much. That, I read, is a much broader scope than the feed-through from the workshops on journalism in defense of democracy and media literacy, disinformation, and so on, where in the program you got those feeds through into the plenary on tackling online harms. We, the UK government, we submitted as an issue the whole roster of issues relating to harmful content, which are undermining trust in the internet, which are making it, the internet, a barrier really to participation by individuals, by adults as well as children, and maybe there should be a feed through from the session on child online safety into the plenary on tackling online harms. So I just seek a clarification, because plenary 7 I had read from first take was that broad scope, and this is in our view very timely, because we, the UK government, we're starting to formulate proposals to underpin action by the media platforms, by intermediaries, with some kind of regulatory underpinning, and we're seeing other governments looking at that too. Am I reading the schedule incorrectly in not expecting that big issue to be covered in that plenary without, because it's only 60 minutes and you've got big issues on media and democracy. I don't want to deny those important issues, but I'm just a bit worried that we're missing the opportunity at EuroDIG in discussing action to tackle online harms, how that intersects with freedom of expression, how that intersects with media platforms' responsibilities, how we are going to make a safer internet. Thank you. So I've gone on quite length, sorry about that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mark. Actually, I took the title of the session from your proposal, Tackling Online Harms, and I think that it sort of implicates that we try to cover the field that you indicated in your proposal, which is really a large field. Now we have 2 workshops leading into it, but it's and there could be many more, of course. But I mean these literature, news literature, and this problem with interference into elections, which is going to be one of the big things this year. They are, like details leading into this whole treatment of online ills, online harms. And of course, I think that 60 minutes is very short for all that. So one of the things that I could actually propose that perhaps we could get a little bit more time. The other thing is that the keynote here is should be somehow related to this online harms, tackling them. And I think that you actually proposed in your proposal a few names. That was your minister of who. I think that there's no disagreement here, actually. Thank you.
Thank you, Euro. It's very helpful.
And one thing I would like to add, because you were asking where we could discuss the future of the IGF, I think that could be something for the NRI Assembly on day 0. And to a certain extent, maybe also it will be covered in plenary 1. You see, after all these ID numbers from the proposals, we also mentioned the Paris call here. So I think this plenary could really take it up from there and continue the discussion in this respect. Okay, the next one is Nina, then Giacomo, and then I take... Nina, do you still have a mic? No? And then raise your hand again. Who else was? So Christina?
Hello, good morning. Thank you so much for the word. Nina Lichtner from the Council of Europe. Actually, I also had just a question about the plenary 7, but I think it's quite explicit, quite clear now that most likely online harm doesn't mean that we will tackle the questions of cyber violence, for example, cyberbullying, etc., and the criminal justice response to it. I believe not. So I was wondering if this topic could be then included, actually it is part of the topic in the workshop 3, child online safety, that would be focused more on the, on children as victims of cyber violence, and we would be happy to contribute to it, since we made recently, last year in summer, the report on cyber violence, especially against women and children. And just another also brief comment concerning the workshop on GDPR. We understand that GDPR is a standalone and vast topic, so it deserves a separate workshop, even the plenary maybe. But we were just wondering if it was possible to look at the data protection from the global perspective, because last year we had another also milestone, namely modernization of the Council of Europe Convention on data protection, and this modernization addresses the challenges of privacy given the recent technological developments. I don't know if it would fit into this workshop, or maybe it could be another flash session or anything else. It would be interesting to integrate it somewhere. Surely agenda is very demanding. There are a lot of proposals. And we are very happy to see that cybersecurity and cybercrime topics are well integrated there, and we are happy to contribute to them. Thanks.
You see that GDPR status and future challenges, so maybe what you are proposing might go under future challenges. I would propose look into the details of the proposal, see if that's kind of goes into the direction that you are proposing, or alternatively suggest another flash session. That's still an option if you think that is a topic that is not covered but should be in the program.
Thanks so much.
So next is Giacomo.
Giacomo Mazzone, Happy New Year to everybody. I have many ideas and suggestions, so I will limit my first intervention to some general questions, because I think that there are some missing links with the discussion we had in Paris. The first link missing is probably not evident, we have in mind, but I think that we need to make evident is which of these topics will be preparing Berlin. So I think that we need to identify which of the plenaries, which of the workshops have the intention to feed the debate in Berlin. The second thing that we discussed in Paris that I don't see here is that, or I see sparse here and there, was that we said that June will be the perfect moment to make an evaluation of what will happen with the fake news and interference with the elections, because we will have just 1 month ahead before us the European elections. And as we know, the high-level group at the European Commission has as a target to reflect and to check if the measures that have been taken will be effective or not, using the European elections as a test bed. So I don't see this reflected. There are points where this could be discussed, but it's not a workshop. It depends. It risks to be something very big and very hot. It depends how it will go. It depends how the interference will affect the results and the polemics that will come out of it. Third point is we discussed in Paris the possibility to have linked, because the NRI session on date 0 is fine, but what is missing last year was the fact that some IGF were not present. So the idea that we discussed with the Commission, I look at Valentina that tried to hide herself, was to see if there are possibility to support the participation of the IGF and making a meeting as we did in the past, in order to have all the IGF, national IGF present there, because this will, of course, will give more relevance and importance to that. Fourth point, and then I stop, and the others I will say later, it was the point that we raised with the Council of Europe. I don't know if Nina is aware of that, but we discussed that eventually, and Thomas mentioned this also with the Council of Europe and Parliamentary Assembly, to organize a delegation of MPs from the Council of Europe Parliamentary Assembly participating. If this is guaranteed, because this year will be the vacuum of the European Parliament, unfortunately, because of the calendar, if this is confirmed, then we need also to have a space specific for this discussion, because we will have a certain number of people dealing with policy issues in national parliament and in the European Parliamentary Assembly. Thank you.
You want to respond?
Yeah, thank you, Giacomo. I think that the workshop 7 is precisely what you are talking about here. It's 90 minutes, and you know, the title is now "Fending Off Trolls: Journalists in Defense of Democracy." But actually, I think that when we have all those elections, European elections and many national elections, including, by the way, in Finland, we have those in the background. I think that this workshop will largely be a comparison of the experiences and how, for instance, how the journalists and other people were actually trying to fend off all this interference that we all hope that will not happen, but may happen. Thank you.
On the issue regarding the linking element between Paris and Berlin, this program proposes plenary 1 as a linking element, and also the report from the digital cooperation where we have a Q&A session. It is up to you to let us know if these are the elements that we should consider as to be the linking elements, or if we want to look into another specific issue that links Paris to Berlin. That's up to you. At the moment, we are proposing digital cooperation in particular, and plenary 1, including the Paris call as a linking element. And on the thing of how to include the NRIs, you're right, Giacomo. Last year, not every NRI could have been there, but travel support was granted, so they had other obstacles that hindered them from not participating in Tbilisi. And as we said, we will offer again travel support to all the NRIs. So it's just up to them to sign up, and all of the European NRIs will be invited on the travel support program. So if they don't come, they might have other reasons for not coming. I hope so too. I share your hope. So the next one is Christina and then Lucevis. And anyone else who wants to speak, just Olivier, raise your hand.
Great, thank you. Christina Lawson from Ethno again. So yeah, thanks so much for your work on the program. I think we see a lot of issues that are really relevant for our members, such as harmful content and how to handle it, e-evidence and cybersecurity. Then perhaps more from an industry perspective, there might be an issue getting more people engaged, because there is perhaps a bit of lack of our core issues, such as infrastructure investment, and perhaps more broadly how Europe can be a leader on digital issues. So I would say here just 2 ideas how to address that. I saw that there were some proposals on IoT, Internet of Things, and I think that could be a possibility to give that more room in some of the sessions on innovation and economic issues, to also tie into other sectors that are normally not engaged here, but that become more relevant with vertical integration, connecting, for example, other type of industries to the internet and creating a connected society. We also think that it will be key to have policymakers participating in these sessions to bring more private sector participants in as well. And so that would be a key recommendation. Of course, we will do our best to engage where we see that we can bring up more industry perspectives in these topics, because there are many things that definitely touch upon our interests. Perhaps just a last note, there is a lot of focus on AI, and here we see also perhaps some overlap and duplication sometimes. I understand, listening now from the program presentation, that this is also to give more room for in-depth conversations and to go deeper into the discussions. But especially with AI, that is still such a new topic, to devote so much time to it, perhaps there is a risk to have a bit premature discussions and making it abstract. So I would really encourage to make this as concrete as possible. And I'm speaking from own experience because we organized a workshop on AI at the IGF this year, and it's still a challenge to make this topic concrete, I would say. So thank you.
Okay. One question with regard to what's missing involving other sectors and so on. The topic or the focus of this workshop too is still relatively broad. I know your proposals are into that. Do you think what you are proposing could go under this workshop, or do you really looking for more space that is offered to the business community and to economy?
I think perhaps a combination, and I also looked at workshop 8 on smart cities, where I think there is also room for bringing in more discussion on IoT and verticals, how they fit into this process, of course. Definitely we will be engaged on workshop 2 and bring in the discussion on 5G, because it's a topic that is core to us right now. So I think there is room to bring in more of these topics, but it perhaps would have been even better to have a dedicated session on this.
Okay, thank you for this clarification. Next is Luzevies.
Yeah, microphone, yes. So I have a comment and a question. The first is on the titles of the sessions. I've raised this a number of times with the IGF as well. I think one of the ways we can try to make it more operational, besides the fact that the titles all need to be, you know, sexier, more catchy, if you want to, especially if you want to get policymakers, politicians to attend, it has to be a little bit more focused and edgy. But I think that if you focus them on the actual result that you're aiming for, that can really be one way to also get the session to be focused. I mean, rather than saying whatever online child safety and literacy, saying how do we protect children from abusers or something, very concretely formulating the outcome that in direction which we're working. So I would strongly advise everybody who's working on these sessions to start naming them in the way that you're going to want to frame them. It will help also, I think, the effectiveness. And then my question is still going back to way back when we were supposed to ask questions on the ICANN session. Now that I'm no longer on the board, I can ask critical questions about this kind of stuff. So Adam and or Andrea, what are you guys planning to do there? Is this just because you're partners and you get to have an ICANN session, or can we make it a little bit more edgy and focused? And, you know, because it's part of internet governance, can we ask, you know, can we also put a critical title on that? You know, is ICANN inclusive enough? Is there a level playing field? How do we make sure there's no capture? I mean, I can think of 100 sexier topics than just calling it ICANN. And can we force ICANN to do that, or do we just say, well, hey, they're a partner, so they get to do whatever they like? Sorry, Adam.
It's me next anyway, and then Andrea may want to, because it was this session. But
Olivier, if you have two fingers, then yes. Otherwise, it was Olivier.
No, it wasn't.
No. You're sure you didn't have two fingers?
Okay. Yeah. In that case, yeah, I think it should just be about ICANN and just us, really. No. Is 3 hours enough? Is the main question. No, the original idea for this, and Andrea can say more, is a sort of introduction to how the internet and how the internet works. Typically, Centre have put in, and they haven't this year. I don't see Paulina or Peter here, which might be because I haven't seen them. Typically, Centre put in a session, an educational session on how the DNS works, and it's just a general introduction to that. And then, so Andrea thought, well, let's do an Internet 101. It's not about ICANN, it's how does the internet work? What is the internet? To help people understand that it's not Facebook, it's not the World Wide Web, it is a collection of autonomous networks, it is functioning in a particular way, and that does set up how the policies do and do not work, how policy policymakers should address the internet. We are concerned that regulations are being proposed that don't take account of how the internet works. So when Chris was looking at this session, he thought, well, we can, doesn't really matter that Centre haven't put in this DNS session as usual. Perhaps we can make it an Internet 101 that runs through how the internet works, how the DNS works, how addressing works, how all this critical internet infrastructure actually goes about operating. And I think we'd want to include Frederick and ISOC in this as well, so that we actually explain this is what the internet does, and then go off and do your policy stuff. But please understand that don't use your policy to break how this stuff works. Because a lot of things that are coming out of the Commission, not a lot of things, there are things coming out of regulators and policymakers that do not take account of how the internet works. So that's the intention of the session. And if there's time, then yeah, talk about the multi-stakeholder models and how it should be more inclusive, principles from Net Mundial. Wolfgang had a session, sorry, I'm blathering on, but Wolfgang had a session talking about Net Mundial +5, because it's 5 years since the Net Mundial proposals. So there's a lot of things we could build in saying about that. But the original intention was this introduction to the internet. Let's get that right, how it actually operationally works, and then build off the policy from that. So that, sorry, yeah.
Two fingers from my side. In addition, there was a more concrete title, ICANN, What Will Come Out of Work Streams to Work. Lucevies.
No, I think I really like this, the way that Adam is going to do that, and I think that's precisely how we can get the policymakers to go there, because most of them actually, the reason there's a risk of them breaking the internet is because they don't know how it works at a technical level. And so if then the title would be more something along the lines of how the internet actually works, or, you know, how the internet works for dummies, but then in a more elegant way, otherwise they might not come. That is a great way to do it. And then, but then it's important to always make that link with the relevant policy developments that are happening, and then give 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 examples saying, this is the kind of regulation that's going to kill it, and this is the kind of regulation that's going to keep it the way we need it and love it.
Two fingers or two? Okay, sorry, Olivier.
No, I've seen the 2 fingers, so
Yeah.
go for it.
Thank you. What I would suggest is that when it's for this specific group that may not even show up, but when they show up, that they're very specifically invited to go to that session. And secondly, I think what is important, what Lucevies also said, these people being lobbied the whole day by perhaps people they don't really understand what their motives motives are, that they perhaps in this session also learn what sort of questions they should ask so that they become better informed with back in their minds the information they've gotten from sessions like this. So that is 2 suggestions to take up. Thank you.
Very good suggestion. Olivier, now it's your turn.
Yeah, thank you. Now I've forgotten what I had to say. No, I haven't. I just wanted to comment on the artificial intelligence comments that we've received earlier from several people around the room, but mainly our gentleman here in the middle. One of the sessions here is about algorithmic awareness. If we go to day 1, there you go, advanced literacy, algorithmic awareness. Now, you know, you can of course have AI means a whole lot of things. It can be this pie in the sky thing of saying, you know, machines will run the world. But in some way, AI, as it translated to what is actually happening today, actually translates to algorithms. Now, you know, you might get asked all sorts of questions when you surf the web. Male, female, where do you live, how old are you, etc. That's of course one thing, and you might decide not to answer these questions. And the machine, the system, will actually then work out and put you in a box from your surfing history, from your browsing history across the internet, not only just across one website, but across a whole lot of things, across the searches that you do. There's a whole number of things that the network will be able, thanks to algorithms, will be able to derive and to actually find out more about you. And I think this is what this workshop is about. To try and show and to bring actually some discussion as to how far these things are going today already, through geolocalization, through your interests, and then giving you more of the stuff that you like and taking away the stuff that you don't like. At that point, how far are you manipulated in your experience, etc. So there's a lot of that going on right now as we speak.
And there's absolutely no regulation about it whatsoever. And in fact, if you do ask about what is in the algorithm, how am I being put into this box or that box, actually, they tell you, I'm sorry, this is company confidential. We can't tell you about that. And that's it. And there's no redress either. So if you are categorized as you believe in, you're categorized in the wrong category of person, and you're therefore tagged as being someone living where you don't, etc. There's no way for you to redress this. So I think that's a sort of a starting point for the discussion that we're trying to raise, and perhaps a follow-up in future years.
Before we go to lunch, because something is outside that's getting cold.
Chris has a...
I see 2 fingers there, and then the last one is Peter. Pardon?
I still had my original question.
Okay, so then let's 2 fingers do here, then Adam, then Peter, and then we stop here and go and have our lunch. I would suggest we think about it over lunchtime and continue the discussion then after lunch. That might also help to exchange. So, Chris, please.
Okay, in a 2 fingers brief kind of way, I just wanted to bring in, I guess, the discussion that I kicked off on the subject matter experts list. And it was to do with AI. And I think Olivier probably explained it quite nicely there, the links from AI to the internet. My concern is that AI is not the internet, that AI is a different subject, in a sense, which has a lot of links to the internet. But I think my concern is that for an internet governance forum, which is what EuroDIG is and what the IGF is, there is a risk that we sort of divert off into what is obviously the very large area of the ethics of algorithms, the ethics of how AI is used, and away from specific internet governance topics. And I think that could serve to dilute the discussions that we have. We have a 2-day program. So I think we need to be very careful, and it's what I think we've tried to reflect in that Day Zero session about AI and its links to internet governance. We need to make sure that what we're focused on is the internet governance implications here, not the much broader topic of AI and all that goes along with that.
I have seen a lot of hectic 2 fingers in Frederick?
No, I will make it short because I'm under pressure by some of you who want to eat. So to make it very short, I fully agree with Chris. To make it longer, could we put that after the lunch? Thank you.
I agree with him. And my non-2-finger comment was to go back to something that Chris said at the start of the day, which was the value of getting some information, particularly about sort of some key named speakers, to get information, a PR document about EuroDIG 2 months before the event, at least, so that we can attract particularly people from business, but also policymakers. And then Lucevic and Mark and Yurio mentioned people specifically around the journalism and media sort of sessions. And Lucevic, I think, alluded to particularly the Oxford Internet Institute, and they've just had a interesting book, Computational Propaganda, which is extremely good. And I would suggest that we invite Phil Howard, who is the director of Oxford Internet Institute. And I thought I'd throw the name out specifically to see, are we at the stage when we want to start talking about names, or do we want to leave that to the subject matter experts? But I think if we could get 5 good names that we could put into a document and get that out by mid to the end of March, then that would be very helpful as a PR thing. So that was just one name that I would say, director of the Oxford Internet Institute. It's still European-ish. So.
Okay, so 2 fingers from Olivier, and then it's Peter. And the food gets cold.
Yeah, thank you. Just one last thing, actually, just for you to think about during lunch, actually. On the subject of algorithms again, and AI, I guess. The majority of coders out there are either white males or Indian males. Now, what does that mean with regards to the bias of any algorithm and the decisions that it makes? Thank you.
Could you pass the phone to Peter, please?
No, I have my own, thank you. So Peter Koch, DINIG. No 2 fingers reply allowed, of course. First, I would like to thank the Secretariat and the SMEs for getting a very, very good draft agenda out there, which means that I would weigh in on the side of those people who are comfortable with what you came up here
and use that as closely as possible as the continued agenda, so no major changes. However, when somebody says, well, no major changes, then they have to add some minor changes. And following up on the previous discussion on the tutorial track or the both educational session, if we actually target politicians, policymakers, and invite them to the educational session that collides with the policy-making sessions at the same day and in the same slot, we might want to reconsider moving the educational session up to day 0, and I think that can be done easily. Other than that, I think the coloring is great, not only the visualization, but it shows that we have cross-sector sessions, which is great, and we have little collisions between the silos on the other hand, with this notable exception that we can probably mitigate. Thank you.
Thank you. And with this, I would leave it, the bilateral discussion for the lunch break. For our remote participants, we will continue in 1 hour from now. Originally, it was scheduled from 12 till 1. Now let's convene here again in the room at 1:30.